You all know exactly who I am. The bald chemistry teacher looked around at the men surrounding him in the desert. Cadillacs, leather jackets, blacked-out shades. The gang members shifted nervously from foot to foot as the man bragged openly about what he's done to build his criminal empire. Walter White's attention turned back to the man in front of him. A slight sneer played around his lips. Now, say my name. The man took a moment to reply as the desert wind blew behind him. He seemed to be weighing his options, realizing quickly that he had lost all control over the situation. You're Heisenberg. You're gut. Bang! Walter White fell to the ground dead. The characters all around yelped in surprise, drew their guns, and started wildly pointing them around the circle, trying to figure out who killed the great Heisenberg. But his killer just stared in awe from his couch in the front room as the Netflix show kept playing on the TV. Had the toy gun in his hand really done that? Josh had admitted to himself that he had a problem a long time ago. But at least being a yard sale addict was cheaper than just a regular old retail addict. Actually, in truth, he was also an estate sale addict, a garage sale addict, and a thrift store addict. Anywhere you could buy people's old junk for rock-bottom prices, he would sniff it out. The Saturday that his life changed forever was just like any other Saturday, really. In the sweaty heat of the Atlantic City suburbs, he hadn't meant to stop by any sales today, but one just so happened to catch his eye. There was a box marked Nerd Stuff, and he took that as a personal challenge. Was this some old lady's version of Nerd Stuff or a veteran dungeon master's treasure trove? The reality was somewhere in between the two. There were a couple of seasons of Buffy on VHS, a copy of the original Deus Ex, and some Legend of Zelda plushies. It hadn't really been worth stopping his car for, except for a little plastic splash of color that caught his eye. Josh reached way down to the bottom of the box and rooted around for it. There was no way. It couldn't possibly be the toy he'd spent all his childhood asking for and never getting, but in fact, it was. A 1985 Nintendo Entertainment System Zapper, with an orange grip and barrel, NES gray bodywork, and the beautiful font printed along the side. It was unmistakable. He threw a wad of cash at the old lady behind the table and rushed back into his car quickly as he could. It was time to cancel his day plans. He had a childhood dream to fulfill. But no sooner that he had got home and flipped on his TV, the dream came crashing down around him. His old NES, the one he'd had since he was a little kid, had sadly keeled over. It refused to power on, no matter what he did. So that made his Zapper pretty much useless. The best he could do with it now would be to point it at the TV and make pew-pew noises with his mouth. So Josh opened up Netflix and put on an episode of Breaking Bad. Little did he know, as he raised the Zapper to the screen, that he was actually in possession of SCP-674. Nobody would know looking at it on the surface. Even the most hardcore gamers wouldn't have a clue, because you can fully disassemble, clean, and reassemble the Zapper and get no indication that it's anything other than what it appears to be. However, as soon as the gun is pointed at a television screen or a computer monitor of any kind, it starts to pose a very real threat. Or at least a very real fictional threat. If you shoot at the screen, whatever media is playing on it at the time will react and adapt to what has just happened. That means characters on the screens will react in accordance with the rules of their respective universes. In a grounded, realistic drama, the gunshot will behave like any other, killing or wounding the victim, with perhaps enough time for them to give a dying monologue. But in an episode of Rick and Morty, the shot could manifest in any number of bizarre and creative ways. News crews that witness the user shooting a person in their live report will continue to cover the incident as if it is part of the ongoing story. If you shoot Walter White, he falls to the ground dead. Josh stared at the screen in utter amazement. He didn't expect the writers to kill off their main character just like that. Wasn't there supposed to be another 9 episodes? What would they do to fill all that time? As the episode played out, it seemed to mostly just follow Jesse, trying desperately to escape with his money before it was too late. He kept glancing towards the camera for some reason, with a slight look of fear in his eyes. Very strange creative decision there. Josh backed out of the show to scroll through his continue watching. There was something a little creepy about how he'd pointed the zapper at the TV, pulled the trigger, and perfectly, at that moment, a character had been shot. Time to pick out another show without any guns and murder for a bit. You know, something safe. The familiar melodica tune filled the lounge as various shots of Dunder Mifflin employees busied themselves, shredding credit cards and answering phone calls. It never ceased to make his worries go away seeing the words "The Office" appear on the screen. He settled into the couch, watching as the characters all gathered in the conference room for some first aid training. The CPR dummy lay on the floor with Michael Scott earnestly explaining to the woman that the victim appeared to have lost their limbs. He laughed along as the scene descended into chaos, as none of the employees took the training seriously at all. Even though he'd seen this episode countless times, it never got old. Absent-mindedly, he pointed the gun at the TV and pulled the trigger. Bang! Pam collapsed on the ground. All of the characters dove out of the way, trying to find cover behind their chairs, not daring to peek out at the camera. Only the first aid lady stayed on the scene, trying her best to resuscitate Pam. It cut to a shot of Dwight talking to the camera sadly. He said that it was almost funny, but there was a real heaviness in the moment. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying off camera. Josh flipped the TV off and stared at himself in the dark reflection. Was he dreaming? He hadn't just done that, had he? Fortunately for Josh and for the rest of humanity, he had not killed Jenna Fischer or Bryan Cranston. He hadn't even killed their characters in the shows, at least not for anyone other than himself. Research into SCP-674 shows that the appearance of characters being killed off on screen only exists in the mind of the shooter. For everyone else, the office remains the same as it always was. Unfortunately for Josh, however, Pam is now dead in that universe and will always be whenever he watches an episode. It leaves a real shadow over the later seasons, but the characters apparently managed to do a good job pivoting into its new, darker tone. Other shows that have been tested in research conditions have yielded interesting results. Like in Star Trek, it is impossible to actually kill Captain Kirk. Instead, various red shirts always just so happen to dive in front of him or fall into frame at the pivotal moment. With a small dead zone on the right-hand side of the screen, characters who witness enough shootings have the sense to stick to that side of the frame whenever the shot is on them, sometimes going so far as to plead directly with the viewer, breaking the fourth wall in their desperation to survive. When Josh came back from a long walk outside, he'd convinced himself that what he had seen earlier was all just some vivid dream. A dream he didn't remember waking up from, but definitely wasn't happening anymore. He'd play some video games, that's what he would do. He had decided he would just play some Super Smash Bros. And unwind. Anyone who has ever said that sentence to themselves will know firsthand how foolish that is. Not 10 minutes later, Josh had definitely forgotten all about his dream from before. He was too busy raging and cursing at the screen. He couldn't stand playing against King Dedede. That stupid hammer move always got him. Without thinking, Josh snatched the zapper from the couch next to him and blasted Dedede right in the face. In classic Smash Bros. Style, the giant Penguin King was launched backwards, flying off the screen in a blast of colorful smoke. But he didn't respawn. For a second, his character just stood on the screen awkwardly before it kicked him back out to the character select screen. This time though, King Dedede's picture was missing. Josh couldn't help himself. He set up a free-for-all match straight away, picking all the characters he hated to fight against. Sonic, Mario, Pikachu, Bowser, Link, Ness, even Wii Fit Trainer. One after the other. Bang, bang, bang. He felt a strange sense of satisfaction once he'd done his work. Great. Now the character list only had the fair, balanced ones left. They just so happened to all be his favorite characters too. But why stop there? Josh jumped across to Elden Ring and marched his knight up through the gate to Stormvale Castle. Before Margit even had gotten through his opening cutscene, Josh had shot the boss right in the face. This boss battle that he'd been stuck on for hours was over before it even started. What could he do now? He put on an episode of Stranger Things and shot the Demogorgon, then Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian, and some goblins in Hogwarts Legacy. The clickers from The Last of Us took a couple extra shots but went down easy enough. He went over to his PC and killed the Ender Dragon in Minecraft without blowing up any beds. He won a game of Rocket League 53-0 after he shot both cars on the opposing team. He played through doors in Roblox without a single jump scare. He would just shoot any monster that filled his screen. What could be better? He reckoned it was time for more movies. Walking back across the lounge, spinning the gun around his finger like a western, he wondered if now would be a good chance to hunt down all the legendary animals in Red Dead 2. It would certainly make the job a lot easier if he could kill them all in just one shot. He'd just need to be careful not to shoot Arthur by accident. But then Josh sat on the remote. The TV flicked over to an old rerun of Bob Ross just as he'd been squaring up to shoot. He pulled the trigger before he could react. The canvas was splattered red. From somewhere off camera, he heard the artist's wheezing voice try to comfort him. "There are no mistakes, just happy." But he died before he could say another word. The Exposition Gun first came onto the SCP Foundation's radar when a strange police report was doing the rounds on an email chain amongst local authorities. They were all finding a great deal of value from a man called Josh, who had turned himself in at his local station in Atlantic City for, quote, killing like everyone. Naturally, the police took his report very seriously, for all of about 10 minutes. As soon as they realized he was talking about video games, TV, and movie characters, the whole case turned into one big joke. They sat Josh down in front of a TV and played him episodes of the shows he was talking about, pointing out characters still alive in scenes after he'd supposedly shot them to death. But he seemed to just grow more distressed as he realized he was experiencing this phenomenon alone. By the time Foundation agents tracked Josh down and took him in for questioning, the gun had moved on. He marched it straight back to the old lady who'd sold it to him, who had then sold it on again. Josh's full account of events and description of the Zapper were taken before he was administered Class C amnestics and allowed to continue with his yard sale addiction uninhibited. SCP-674 was found sometime later in the possession of a 33-year-old Caucasian male simply referred to as Mr. S. A reclusive man in a neighboring city, Mr. S first gained the SCP Foundation's attention through his extremist political blog, in which he claimed to have assassinated prominent political figures, news anchors, and talk show hosts. While the truth of those claims was demonstrably false, it was clear from the way he described events that he really did believe the delusion. After being questioned, it was discovered that he had never left his home. Instead, he stayed on his couch, watching news reports and firing at any prominent figures that appeared, believing that he was indeed killing them in the real world. Despite claiming that he was using SCP-674 to prevent a military police state, using the device to assassinate so many high-profile figures had the opposite effect on his video reality. In his blog posts, he described an increasingly unstable global order, martial law, and catastrophic events consistent with the hypothetical release of 2 deadly SCPs. His house was barricaded, with security cameras set up in every direction. The more he had been using the gun, the more the characters and journalists on TV had threatened him, claiming that the SCP Foundation were on their way to apprehend him and that he would face retribution for what he had been doing. Mr. S's intended ambush of Foundation agents failed. While they appeared to be dying on the security feeds he had set up, the agents experienced no physical harm in reality as they apprehended the man and seized SCP-674. While the majority of researchers have deemed that SCP-674 is harmless to all but the mental well-being of the shooter, there was a notably sinister result to Mr. S's time in Foundation detention. Alone in his cell, Mr. S soon started to engage in heated arguments with the security camera set up to monitor him. There is no record of any voices in the room other than his own, yet he seemed to be locked in a fierce argument. All of a sudden, Mr. S dropped to the ground dead with 3 .38 caliber handgun bullets lodged in his chest. The entirety of his holding cell was searched for evidence of a shooter, but none was found. The Exposition Gun remains in a locked plastic case in Storage Site 23. Aside from regular cleaning and maintenance, it is used under controlled circumstances to creatively gather intelligence about further SCP activity. In the event of the site being compromised, personnel are allowed to destroy the Exposition Gun at their own discretion, should it fall into the wrong hands. Now check out SCP-348 A Gift from Dad and SCP-978 Desire Camera for more.